The Top Floor Please podcast, where women in leadership rise together. I'm your host, Melissa McCormick, executive coach and founder of the Grace and Salt Leadership Academy. This is your space to find clarity, grow in confidence, and lead with bold authenticity. Whether you're navigating the boardroom, building your team, or stepping into new territory, you're not alone. Let's talk real challenges, real growth, and real leadership because the top floor isn't just a place, it's a mindset. Alrighty then, let's get started.
Question. How much more do you have to prove? How much? Seriously, I want you to think about this. Take a moment. Let's think about everything that you've accomplished. You've earned promotions. You've led teams. You've delivered results, right? You've solved problems, built credibility. I mean, my goodness sakes, you have the title. You have the experience. You have the track record. And yet, sometimes you still feel like you're auditioning. Like every presentation has to be perfect. Guilty. Every decision has to be justified. Every recommendation has to be backed by overwhelming evidence. Every mistake feels bigger than it should. And every success feels temporary. Every new challenge somehow convinces you that you need to prove yourself all over again. And if that's you, today's conversation is for you. At some point in leadership, the challenge is no longer proving your credibility. The challenge is believing what you've already proven. Welcome to the Top Floor Please podcast. This is the podcast for leaders who are ready to stop drowning in the day-to-day, get out of the weeds, and start leading with greater clarity, confidence, and strategic influence. Hi, my name is Melissa McCormick, and I am the host of the Top Floor Please podcast. You know, back in the day, I wanted to go to law school, but instead of arguing cases in the courtroom, I traded the courtroom for the boardroom. And now I help leaders stop arguing with their calendar. I help overwhelmed business owners and leaders get out of the weeds, communicate clearly, strengthen their teams, and get their time back. So today's message is this. At some point, leadership requires you to stop proving you belong and start acting like you do. And that is harder than it sounds. So let's talk about that. And by the way, I just, in full transparency, although I am teaching this today, I'm also the student because I have the same issues right now as a small business owner, as stepping out, doing all of these things differently than I did in my corporate world. When I was in corporate, I had learned these and I did them quite well. But now as an entrepreneur, I find myself relearning these same lessons that I'm talking about on this podcast, but this one specifically. So I just want you to know that although I'm the teacher today, I am also the student. Now, most high achieving women, they didn't wake up one day and decide to become perfectionists, right? They were trained into it. Let's think about this. For years, our success was tied to performance, right? Think about it. Good grades, strong results, exceeding expectations. When I went and got my master's in organizational leadership at Southern New Hampshire University, I got a 4.0. I've never had a 4.0 in my entire life. Every single class, I got an A because that's what I was supposed to do, right? Exceeding expectations. Everybody wants exceeding expectations on their performance review, don't we? Yeah. So we're prepared. We're dependable. We want to be the one who's looked at to get things done. And those habits honestly have served us well. In fact, they probably help. In fact, I know they helped build your career, my career. In fact, those are things that I have told my children. You want to succeed to get to your career goals, whatever those might be. These are the things that you have to do. But eventually, something very interesting happens. The behaviors that helped us get promoted, they start creating this friction at the executive level. Because executive leadership isn't about proving you can do the work. It's about demonstrating that we can lead the work. That's a very different skill. Many accomplished leaders, we continue approaching every challenge as though we're trying to earn permission to be there, right? When we've already been invited into the room. Again, that's me. That's me right now. I'm doing I'm creating programs and writing curriculum and writing books and doing all these things that I had never done before. And I have the experience and I have the knowledge to share. And I've already been invited into the room, but yet I'm still freaking out. So here are some signs that you might still be auditioning. Okay. So I want you to think about this. Is this you? Do you over prepare for meetings? Guilty. Do you spend hours anticipating every possible question? Guilty. You create 10 slides when 3 would do. Maybe you write and rewrite emails before sending them. Guilty. You explain every decision in detail because you want everyone to understand your perspective and your reasoning. Maybe you seek consensus before moving forward. You hesitate before sharing an opinion. You might soften recommendations with phrases like this. You might say, maybe I'm wrong, but, or I'm not sure, but, or, this might not make sense, but, and here's the biggest sign of all. You feel responsible for making everyone comfortable with your decisions. Does that sound familiar? Do any of those resonate with you? Because you're not alone. As I mentioned, I'm there with you. Although I'm teaching, I'm still the student. And many successful leaders are still operating from that mindset that they developed years and years ago, that mindset of proving rather than leading. So I want to just kind of segue just a little bit into talking about the difference between managers and executives. So one of the biggest shifts that I've observed during my corporate career was this. Managers often seek approval, but executives exercise judgment. That doesn't mean executives are arrogant. It absolutely doesn't mean that they stop listening. It doesn't mean that they know everything. It means they understand their role. Organizations don't promote leaders because they expect them to have all the answers. That's a big one right there. Organizations don't promote leaders because they expect them to have all the answers. So why do they promote leaders? Because they trust their judgment. That's why. Organizations don't promote those leaders because they expect them to have all the answers. They trust their judgment. But many leaders, they continue behaving as though they need permission to use it, right? It's kind of ironic. The organization may already trust you more than you trust yourself. So true. That's honestly, I am preaching to the choir right here. So here's a lesson that I learned during my executive career that really surprised me. I had assumed that everyone around the boardroom table had it all figured out. Like I thought that they knew everything, like they knew what was going on, right? I assumed they were more confident. I thought they were definitely more certain, more prepared, and all these reports, all these papers, more capable. But then over time, I realized most of them were making decisions with incomplete information, just like everyone else was doing. Many of them were uncertain. Many were figuring it out as they went. The difference wasn't confidence. The difference was willingness. They were willing to make a recommendation. They were willing to make a decision. They were willing to move forward while others were still trying to gather enough evidence to feel completely certain, right? They were making the decisions. And that realization changed the way I viewed leadership. Because certainty is rarely the requirement. Judgment is. So I want to talk now about the costs. Like, what does it cost to constantly prove yourself? First, it costs a lot of energy. Oh my gosh, how much energy, right? Because you're doing and redoing and all the things. When every decision feels like a test, leadership becomes exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. Second, it so slows the speed of business. It slows decision making. You spend time seeking reassurance when action is what is needed. And third, it reduces your influence. People tend to follow leaders who communicate with clarity and convictions. And finally, honestly, it limits your growth. Not because you're incapable, absolutely not, but because you're still operating from a mindset that no longer serves the level that you're at. So at some point, the need to prove yourself becomes the very thing holding you back. Isn't that crazy? So if this episode if this episode is hitting close to home at all, I've got 3 things to stop doing. I want you to stop over explaining. Not every decision requires a 10-minute defense. Sometimes a clear recommendation is enough. And let's just reduce those words. Number 2, I want you to stop over apologizing. Executive leaders don't apologize for having a point of view. They don't say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but no, they speak. You can be gracious, right? Without minimizing yourself. You can be polite without, saying, I'm sorry, I guess. That's the thing, right? You do not have to apologize. And third is, I want you to stop over justifying. You don't need unanimous agreement before taking action. Leadership often requires making decisions despite incomplete information. So I want you to trust your gut, trust your judgment. That's why you're in the role. Then I want you to communicate what you've decided. Okay. So, and I'm not saying that you should be on that you should go rogue and you should go against the culture and all of those things. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that if you are in that role and the expectations of you is to make those decisions without having to double check with your boss every time, then make the decision. That's what I'm saying. And then I want you to communicate what you've done so that others know, because you're not on the island all by yourself, and I don't want you to be. Depending on the severity of the decision, right? You may need to bring in other leaders, and then everybody's deciding together. I'm not telling you to be the lone wolf. I hope you understand the nuance there. So imagine walking into your next leadership meeting with a different mindset. Not, oh, I hope they agree with me. No, here's what I believe is best for the business. And so this is what I'm going to tell them. I don't want you to be thinking, I need to prove I'm qualified. And a lot of times these thoughts aren't conscious thoughts, right? But they're there. They're there. I don't want you to walk into that room with, I need everyone to approve, or, I need to approve, or I need them to approve of me. I want you to walk in there with that different mindset that says, I need to provide leadership. Right? You see the difference there? One mindset seeks validation, and the other accepts responsibility. That's the shift executive leaders eventually make. And that's what gets noticed and gets you, to your career goals. So the 3 takeaways today. The first one is, the habits that helped you succeed early in your career may not be the habits that help you lead at the executive level. Number 2, organizations promote leaders because they trust their judgment, not because they expect perfection. And the third key takeaway, at some point, leadership requires you to stop proving you belong and start acting like you do. So before we wrap up today, take one idea from this episode and ask yourself this: where am I still trying to prove something that's already been proven? Where am I still trying to prove something that's already been proven? Because leadership is not about earning your place over and over again. It's about stepping fully into the place you've already earned. And sometimes the next level of leadership isn't learning a new skill. It's about letting go of an old mindset. I work with leaders who are buried in the day-to-day. I help them simplify things, get out of the weeds, start running the business instead of the business running them. And if that sounds like where you are and you're interested in the Executive Accelerator program, I want you to go to graceandsaltleadership.com to learn more, or you can send me a direct message. I would love to hear from you. If this episode resonated with you at all, and you know of somebody who could use this perspective, please share it with a leader. And also, finally, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's next. It has been amazing chatting with you today. Keep leading forward.
Thanks so much for hanging out on the top floor. If today's episode gave you something to think about or a little boost, share it with your friends to keep the momentum going. And hey, if you're ready to rise, find your voice, and lead with clarity and confidence, we'd love to connect with you. Reach out at graceandsaltleadership.com to learn how Grace and Salt can support your growth. Remember, you don't have to lead like everyone else. Just lead like you. All right, I'll see you next time on the top floor.